No memory of crash. The engineer of an Amtrak train that derailed, killing 8, can't recall what happened. Canadians march for life. Thousands of pro-lifers gather in Ottawa and across Canada today. Complete turnaround. A New Jersey woman who once assisted with abortions now shares a powerful pro-life message. And costly diagnosis. Dementia among people still active in careers grows more costly for businesses. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for this Ascension Thursday, May 14th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The engineer at the controls of the train that derailed, killing 8 people, does not remember the crash. So his attorney tells ABC News. Jason Calvi reports from Washington's Union Station where that ill-fated trip began.
Brian, the Amtrak train that left here on Tuesday never made it to its destination in New York City. Investigators say it was going twice the speed limit when it went off the rails, but they're still trying to find out why.
The National Transportation Safety Board is collecting evidence from the crash site in Philadelphia, looking at the data in the train's black box, all to figure out why the train was speeding at more than 100 miles an hour before a sharp curve, where the speed limit drops to 50. The NTSB wants to talk to the train's engineer, identified as 32-year-old Brandon Bastian of New York.
This person has gone through a very traumatic event, and we want to give him an opportunity to convalesce for a day or so before we interview him.
Bastian's lawyer tells ABC News he remembers approaching the curve, was attempting to slow down, and was knocked out. The attorney says his client's memory will probably return once he recovers from a concussion. 243 passengers and crew members were on the train.
We just flew. It almost felt like flying, but it wasn't the right kind of flying, and it hit with a thud.
Among the dead, 20-year-old Justin Zemser. He was a student at the U.S. Naval Academy, where his football teammates called him Z.
Z definitely showed his selflessness and his love for his entire team. He dedicated his whole entire life to our team.
Philadelphia's mayor now says all passengers and crew members have been accounted for. Trains are now leaving D.C. heading to Philadelphia, but they're not going from Philly to New York. Reporting here at Union Station, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. The death toll in Nepal's second major earthquake has now passed 125. More than 2,500 people were hurt in this week's magnitude 7.3 quake. The U.S. Marines today continue efforts to help survivors recover from this disaster. Millions of people are still suffering from the devastation of the first, more powerful quake on April 25th. A bill giving lawmakers power to review any potential nuclear deal with Iran now goes to the president. The House today passed the measure, already approved by the Senate, overwhelmingly. The White House says the president will sign the bill into law. It gives Congress 30 days to examine any final deal before sanctions against Iran are lifted. The president and leaders from 6 Gulf nations are meeting right now at Camp David. They're working through tensions sparked by a possible nuclear deal with Iran. The visitors were formally welcomed at the White House on Wednesday. Only 2 countries actually sent heads of state. The others sent lower-level diplomats. One of 2 Secret Service agents accused in a drunk driving incident in an agency vehicle now plans to retire. The second-ranking agent on President Obama's security detail. This comes ahead of a report saying Mark Connolly is a second agent were likely alcohol impaired in the incident 2 months ago. A national Right to Die group is convicted of assisting in the suicide of a Minnesota woman. 57-year-old Doreen Dunn took her life in 2007 after suffering chronic pain for years. Sentencing is set for August, but the lawyer for Final Exit Network says the decision will be appealed. While smaller than the annual March for Life here in Washington, Canada's National March for Life today in Ottawa is vibrant and growing. Joy Pinto, who anchored today's live coverage on EWTN with her husband Jim, joining us from Ottawa. Joy, give us a quick snapshot of today's march and the activities surrounding it.
Well, it was absolutely a spectacular day, weather-wise, and with the massive crowd that came out. 25,000 people came out, old and young, mothers, babies. Around the march, the night before, we had a round table that was hosted by EWTN, which is a national pro-life round table. There was also a prayer vigil, then there was Eucharistic adoration, and then this morning, there were masses all over this city, just praying and worshiping to end the culture of death.
Well, they certainly have better weather there in Canada in May than we have here in D.C. in January for our march. But young people here and there seem to be energizing this pro-life movement. Are you seeing that there in Ottawa?
Well, yes, and they were so excited. They were so encouraged. The bishops came out, priests came out, but the young people came out because the laws that this nation is making is going to affect the youth for generations to come. And so they were out here, 25,000, and strong and vibrant and full of the message of the gospel of life. There is hope for Canada. And the theme was Let Life Win.
So this is the 18th year for the march there. You say 25,000. You've seen this grow over the years, haven't you?
Well, they have, and we spoke with the founders of the march, and when they started 18 years ago, there was about 800 people. There was just a couple of hundred people. But EWTN has exploded it to the whole world. So even we had people coming up to us thanking EWTN with tears in their eyes because this is a great, what they're facing is abortion, euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide. And so Canada needs our prayers because their theme needs to echo throughout the entire world, and EWTN will bring it. Let life win.
All right, Joy Pinto, thank you and Jim and the rest of the EWTN crew for the great coverage. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Brian.
A House-passed bill to ban most abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy now moves to the Senate. 4 Democrats sided with 238 Republicans to pass the ban late yesterday. The original bill, lacking enough support to pass, was abruptly pulled on the day of January's March for Life here in D.C. Before Wednesday's vote, the House Republican Conference Chair spoke with News Nightly about the updated bill.
This is a stronger bill. This is a better bill that is really focused on protecting those babies that are developed at 5 months, 20 weeks. They feel pain and they have the potential to live outside the womb, and it's a good day for America.
The bill is unlikely to become law. Its fate is uncertain in the Senate, and it would face an almost certain White House veto. Pro-life advocates say the graphic trial and conviction of Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell helped gain support for this type of legislation. Susanne LaFrankie joining us to report on the impact this case is having on the pro-life movement.
Well, Brian, this case appears to have awakened the nation. For decades, Gosnell operated an illegal late-term abortion clinic. Pro-life leaders say the abortion industry knew of his practice, often referring patients. The question is, why didn't authorities stop him?
Murder is murder. You don't want to be a murderer. You don't want to have that on your hands. It's gruesome, but it's not far from what they do at every abortion clinic.
Kendra suffered a mental breakdown after working at this abortion clinic. She wrote a paper for college as therapy.
He had a frown on his face and his hands were clenched tight. His eyebrows were raised as if he just suffered serious pain.
Jurors who convicted Gosnell say the evidence was undeniable.
There were children that died at the hands of this man. You know, that was what was hard for me to admit, that kind of evil exists in this world.
After pro-choice Republican Tom Ridge became governor, the Pennsylvania Department of Health abruptly stopped inspecting all 22 of the state's abortion clinics.
Hair and nail salons in Pennsylvania had much stricter standards and guidelines than abortion centers had.
After Gosnell's conviction, the state passed new stricter laws regulating the abortion industry.
Once those standards went into effect, 5 abortion centers in Pennsylvania closed because 3 of them just couldn't meet the standards, and 2 of them decided they didn't even want to try to meet the standards.
Reporter J.D. Mullane, who covered the 10-week trial, says it has forever changed him.
When you take a look at the pictures, what do you see? Do you see clumps of cells, or do you see human beings? You see human beings.
Pro-life advocates say there are many more Kermit Gosnells out there. The Pro-Life Federation says 203 pro-life laws have been passed in the U.S. at the state level in just the last 3 years, so progress is being made. Also, the site of Gosnell's clinic may soon become a pregnancy crisis center. Brian?
Susanne LaFrankie, thank you. Mollie Hemingway is senior editor at the Federalist. And Mollie, you would contact journalists and ask them, why aren't you covering this case? What was the response you got?
It was amazing. After 2 years of them not covering anything to do with Gosnell, I finally got fed up and began asking them why they weren't covering it. And some people would defend themselves saying that they had written one story with 4 paragraphs, 2 years prior. But perhaps the most appalling answer I got was from a reporter at the Washington Post who said, "Mollie, I'm a health policy reporter. I don't cover local crime." She said that publicly, so immediately people began responding that, of course, the Washington Post covers local crime all the time, whether it's what happened in Sandy Hook or, what happens, later from what happened in Ferguson or Baltimore. Covering local crime happens all the time. So the answer was grossly insufficient, and people knew it.
Well, we had pro-life activists out there in front of Gosnell's clinic for years. How was this allowed, this torture, this murder allowed to go on for so long?
Well, some of it was just touched on. The regulatory regime was completely absent. It's worth noting that the only way he was found out was through drug enforcement agents, not through any regulation of the abortion industry. Then there was also the fact that the pro-choice community knew what was going on and they never reported him, in fact, referring patients to him, including, patients who ended up dead, and then also the media, which completely lacks any curiosity about the abortion industry, unlike all the other industries they cover.
This is a story that's very difficult to watch, to think about, to talk about. It's very graphic, but why is it important that stories like this are covered by the media?
I actually think that's why it's important to cover it. We don't avoid covering what happens in war because of the difficulties of that topic. People need to know the truth of abortion. This was an important story because it showed us a little bit about the victim of abortion. That's something that the media really struggle to cover, and they always present it as just an issue of women, and they never think about what happens in the abortion and who is targeted in the abortion.
This bill that finally passed in the House yesterday, do you think Gosnell's conviction helped that?
Absolutely. Not just that, but all the pro-life legislation that you've been seeing in the last couple of years. People say that this Gosnell story made them think more deeply about the abortion topic in a way that they hadn't before. So you can definitely see that as the younger generations continue to become more pro-life, this type of story also animates other people.
So 2 years down the road from his conviction, we are making some progress, you think?
It's funny, when I first started thinking about this issue back when I was a child, I thought it was almost a lost cause. And now we see that there has been so much progress made, and it's the pro-life movement has really made, through incremental gains, has made a lot of changes.
Young people are saying we'll end abortion in our lifetime. We pray that they do. Thank you, Mollie Hemingway with the Federalist.
Thank you.
Well, jurors continue deliberations in Boston, deciding whether marathon bomber Johar Tsarnaev should live or die. As Wyatt Goolsby reports tonight, the people of Massachusetts are split on the government's ultimate sentence.
Outside Boston's federal courthouse, a group of protesters expressing their opposition to sentencing convicted marathon bomber Johar Tsarnaev to death for his role in the 2013 terrorist crime. A sign of just how split Massachusetts is over the imposition of the death penalty.
I think, first of all, on a legal basis, the people of Massachusetts already decided that we don't support death penalty. And so there should not be a death penalty awarded in our state.
It's being considered here because Tsarnaev has been charged under federal law, not Massachusetts law. However, Northeastern University law professor Daniel Medwed says there is a long tradition of opposition to the death penalty in Massachusetts.
There has not been an execution in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts since 1947, and it's been illegal since 1984. So there's a strong culture and tradition against the death penalty.
In fact, the family of Martin Richards, the marathon bombing's youngest victim, have expressed their opposition to the death penalty for Tsarnaev. Others agree, saying don't make Tsarnaev a martyr.
If he was a martyr and that's what he wanted, then that's the last thing he should get, because he doesn't deserve that. He hurt a lot of people, and he deserves to suffer for as long as he can.
I think about it all the time, every day.
Liz Norden disagrees. Her 2 sons were seriously injured in the incident, but survived.
We have a death penalty for a reason, so if there's ever a case that warrants a death penalty, I mean, this would be it.
12 jurors continue to debate the sentence. Unless they return with a unanimous decision in favor of the death penalty, Tsarnaev will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, can light break through the darkness of the Islamic State's reign of terror? More Capitol Hill testimony today. And the early onset of dementia in people who are still working can prove very costly for business. Today, exactly 40 days after Easter Sunday, marks the traditional celebration of Ascension Thursday. With a few exceptions, Nebraska and parts of the Northeast, the solemnity of the Ascension of our Lord is now observed in the U.S. this Sunday. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Witnesses to ISIS brutality against religious minorities speak out here in Washington.
I've been to Sinjar Mountain. I've met the girls that have been kidnapped and raped by ISIS. In the midst of all this darkness, I see that there's light. Light can break through the darkness, and we need to take our role as human beings, push them, and help them to survive and thrive.
At a House committee hearing Wednesday, witnesses urging the U.S. to do more to stop the ISIS reign of terror. That panel included a Dominican sister who was forced out of her Iraqi home by the terrorists, and the person you just saw earlier, Jacqueline Isaac. Jacqueline is the vice president of Roads of Success. That's a group that strives to advance human rights in the Middle East. Your testimony was chilling. You talked about the abuse of these women. You talked about how this ISIS has become a nerve center and needs to be cut off at the head. Put that into context.
This is systematic. This is evil at its worst. We are talking about the devil in his flesh. That is ISIS. If we do not cut the snake at its head, let's think about it. One area they've been able to attract all the crazies, all the menace is right there. If we don't cut it in their front lines, they will come to our front lines. It's not worth it to wait. What are we waiting for?
What should we do?
We need to support the Peshmerga army and their partners like Egypt and Jordan as they fight on their front lines, as they risk the lives of their armed forces. We need to help them, and we need to bring awareness. We need to think, this can happen to our daughters.
I have 3 beautiful daughters, and I know that you are a beautiful daughter of parents. And these religious minorities, especially the women and children that you refer to, how can they be protected from this?
They need to be protected by the entire world. I've had many Christians and Yazidis say they will not return home until they feel that they're really secured by the international forces, by international people coming in and saying, hey, we want to help. What does that mean? It means humanitarian support. It means psychological care. It means medical care. It means people being on the ground, knowing what's truly happening, and not just letting this war take over the region. People need to stand their ground, and we can all do something. You know, we can even do it on Skype. I met the girls that were kidnapped and raped by ISIS that were rescued. We spent time teaching them through Roads of Success, our organization. We empowered them. We let them dream again.
Well, ISIS is using the internet, social media, so the opposition can do that effectively as well, I'm sure. You met recently with Pope Francis. What did he say to you?
I had a picture with all the kids in Iraq, and I showed him the picture, and I said, would you pray for these people? He said, I promise you I'll pray for them. And then he came up to me and said, would you pray for us? What a humble man. A man that's on his knees praying for the world. He has a heart for the religious minorities. This man sees the bigger picture. God bless him.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Jacqueline Isaac. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
In other news tonight, New England quarterback Tom Brady is challenging his NFL 4-game suspension. The NFL Players Association filed an appeal on Brady's behalf today. That suspension is punishment for his suspected role in the illegal deflation of footballs during the playoffs. A new report says Brady was likely at least generally aware of the footballs being softened to his liking. The Patriots haven't yet said if they'll appeal a $1 million fine. The team is also losing its first-round draft pick next year and a fourth-round pick in 2017. A rise in dementia combined with early detection means more people are diagnosed with that disease while they're still active in their career. Tonight, Catherine Szeltner reports on how a dementia diagnosis impacts businesses.
I'd lost my way, where 2 hours ago I was full of gusto and thought I had a pretty good day, but all of a sudden I couldn't find my car.
At age 53, Keith Glantz was diagnosed with dementia and forced to retire.
He started to forget, where he had to be at what time. He couldn't actually manage any of that.
Glantz is just one example of an Australian developing dementia while still working. According to Alzheimer's Australia, more than 340,000 Australians have dementia. 25,000 of them are under the age of 65. Gordon James used to be a broker who ran a business with his wife. He's now at the end stage of dementia, and his wife admits the disease led to work oversights.
There are certain obligations that are required by law, and I think we may have been letting some clients down, and some mistakes could have been made.
But these possible mistakes may lead to actual legal consequences for employers. Some suggest businesses could be sued for their workers' condition.
I think the potential for litigation is very real. If their careers have been impacted upon by bad decisions, bad thinking. Similarly, within businesses themselves, they may be sued as an organisation because of bad decisions in the upper hierarchy of the organisation.
Alzheimer's Australia says these concerns need to be a priority for the government.
If we ignore this issue, it's at our peril. We've seen the numbers that have increased, and you know, we're going to see an increasing prevalence of this condition. We can't afford to ignore it.
Australia and other nations still haven't created a framework to manage dementia at the workplace. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization estimates there are 47.5 million people living with dementia worldwide. Those cases are expected to triple by 2050. With this increase, companies will need to be equipped to handle employees with dementia. Brian?
Catherine Szeltner, thank you. Up next, 70,000 people now expected for next month's papal mass in Bosnia. And the church's official international relief agency has new leadership. Dear parents, have great patience and forgive from the depths of your heart. A reminder for parents and all of us from Pope Francis on his Twitter account today. Thanks for joining us on this Ascension Thursday evening. One of Asia's most prominent cardinals now heads the church's global charity and development organization. Cardinal Luis Tagle will continue to serve as Archbishop of Manila, but he will also lead Caritas Internationalis. The 57-year-old Tagle welcomed Pope Francis to the Philippines in January. Caritas is the church's charitable arm operating in about 200 countries. From Rome, Sean Callaghan, Chief Operating Officer for Catholic Relief Services, is with us. Sean, can you tell us a little bit about the new leadership at Caritas Internationalis, Cardinal Tagle?
Yes, Cardinal Tagle was just elected a few moments ago. He is the Cardinal and Archbishop of Manila in the Philippines, and he probably became best known to the Caritas community with the response to Hurricane Haiyan, which he was very, very involved in assisting the people after that devastating hurricane in the Philippines.
Caritas, of course, is known as the heart of the church. How does Caritas and CRS work together?
Well, CRS is a member of Caritas. Caritas is a 164-member confederation of Catholic organizations throughout the world. And so CRS works in communion with the local Caritas partners throughout the world in serving the poor. So Catholic Relief Services provides capacity strengthening, some resources, and we have teams on the ground supporting the local church throughout the world.
Many of us here in the United States give to Catholic Relief Services, most recently connected with the earthquake in Nepal. When we give, how is that money used? How are you able to help people with our gifts?
That money is going directly to the people in Nepal most affected by the disaster. Catholic Relief Services is working closely with Father Pius, who's the head of Caritas Nepal. We had people on the ground actually when the earthquake occurred, and then bolstered that team on the ground to support the local Nepal Caritas. So we have people currently working there, helping the people, suffering the same aftershocks, so they are all in solidarity with the local Nepali community and being with them during this most difficult time.
All right, Sean Callaghan, Chief Operating Officer of Catholic Relief Services, joining us from Rome. Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome, Brian. Thank you.
And excitement is growing in Bosnia ahead of the visit of Pope Francis next month. He'll celebrate Mass for 70,000 pilgrims in Sarajevo, a predominantly Muslim city. Many come from Bosnia and Croatia, especially Herzegovina, the site of Medjugorje. The reported appearance of the Virgin Mary there in 1981 is not officially recognized by the Vatican, but millions of pilgrims visit Medjugorje each year. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Until tomorrow, good night, and may God bless you.